Hello and welcome back to this tutorial. In our previous video, we learned how to work with CSV files. In this video, we are going to be learning how to work with JSON files. So what is JSON? Well, the word JSON means JavaScript Object Notation. So like the name implies, it originated from JavaScript and it was created to be like a data structure that can be used to store data in applications in a human readable form and also in machine readable form. All right, so you as the owner of the program or the writer of the program, you'll be able to understand this data, access it and modify it, and also the machine, they will be able to analyze and access the data, right? So now that is JSON file. Now this file format, although it's originated from JavaScript, it is used across most of the programming languages. So Python also use JSON to store data and to analyze data. So in this video, we are going to be learning how to use JSON. And for the meantime, we are just going to import JSON. So when we worked with CSV files, we imported it. So now I'm going to import JSON. So now we've imported JSON module into our file. And when we worked with CSV files, we were able to work with the writer and the reader functions, okay? And also the dict writer and the dict reader. So now that we are going to work with JSON, there are two primary methods that we are going to be looking at, and that is JSON.dump and JSON.load, okay? So JSON do not have so many methods. So if you want to write into a JSON file, you use the dump method, and if you want to read from a JSON file, you use the load method. So what are the kinds of data that can be passed into a JSON file? Well, the way JSON stores an object, by default, JSON stores objects as dictionaries, okay? Just the way we have our dictionary. So JSON stores the data. So JSON stores data in key value pairs. So now, primarily, the type of data that is usually passed into a JSON object are primarily dictionary structures, but other data types also can be passed into a JSON file. A list can be passed into a JSON file, a tuple can be passed into a JSON file, even a string, even a number, just a single number can be passed into a JSON file. All right. So without further waste of your time, we are just going to jump into our VS Code and start working with JSON. So now I'm going to open another file. So I'm going to write my with statement and I'm going to write open. So we know the syntax already. So we pass in the file type. So this time we are going to call it JSON file. And then we pass in the file extension. So the file extension for JSON file is .json. So now I'm opening this file in write mode. So like we already know, if you want to write into a file, you should write it in write or write plus mode. Okay. So now I'm going to write my colon and I'm going to start working with JSON file here. So I'm going to pass my as keyword and pass in the variable name for this file. So the variable name, I'm going to just call it file. So you can see that we also have a file variable here, but it is for this block. So we are not going to be accessing this variable here. And I'm going to write my colon and we are going to start working with our JSON file. So now I'm going to try to write into this JSON file. And for that, I'm going to create a variable. So I might call it write because right now I'm trying to write into the file. And I'll set it to JSON.dump. Okay. And I'm going to open and close my parentheses. So this dump function takes two primary arguments. Now, the first argument it is going to take is the data that you are passing into this JSON file. And the second argument it is going to take is the file object that you're going to write into. Okay, so this file object is for this file that we are writing into. So now, for the meantime, I'm going to copy this dictionary, one of these dictionaries that I have here, and I'm going to create a variable up here and call it data. And I'll set it to, well, this dictionary. So it seems we already have a data variable up there. So I'm going to comment out all of this. And now I'm going to pass in this data object here. So the first thing I'm going to pass in is the data. And the second thing I'm going to pass in is the file object. So I'm going to pass in file. Now this JSON.dump also takes a third argument. And this third argument is simply the argument that enables you to format the file. So for now, we are going to do without it. And right now, I am just going to run this code. So now we have a new file here created and we have this data that we created inside our JSON file. So now one beautiful thing about JSON file is that it gives you exactly what you pass into it. Okay, so but this new date, as you can see, this is a list of dictionary that we created earlier. So if we decide to pass this new dictionary into that JSON file, so I'm just going to pass in this new date, you will see that the content of the JSON file is going to be exactly what we have here. So right now I'm going to run this and we have it exactly the way it is. Okay, just a list of dictionaries. So far you know your data structure that you're passing in. If you want to access each of this data, you can decide to say that the first index of this list, you access it by index 1, and then you can now start accessing the data in this dictionary using the dictionary methods. So now we are going to try to read this JSON file. And for that, we are going to go ahead and write our load function. So we are saying we are going to write this JSON.load. And this JSON.load is going to just take one argument. And this one argument is the file object that we are going to read from. So now I'm going to just open this in write mode and I'm going to clear my terminal. So the next thing I'm going to do is to print the objects that I just loaded from this JSON file. So I can decide to change this variable name to read because right now we are reading the file. So it doesn't matter, but I just want to do it so that you understand the changes. So now I'm going to just print this. And what do I want to print? Read. So, and I'm going to run this. So you see that we now have all of the data that we have in our JSON on our terminal. Now, coming to this file, you can see that the two dictionaries, they are here, they are lined horizontally. And when you have a lot of data here, you might need to format this in a way that this will come to this line and probably, something like that, format the file in a more readable way. So assuming you need to achieve something like that, we are going to put this file back in the write mode and try to dump into the JSON file. So, and I'll change also what I have here. So I'm now going to pass in the third. So now I'm going to pass in the third argument. So the third argument is index, and this takes an integer as a value. So I'm going to say that the index should be, well, any integer between 1 and 10. So I'm going to write 3. So now I'm going to run this, and again we have written this into the JSON file. So now you can see now that this this dictionary that is here has been neatly formatted. So I'm going to pass in the new dict again and run it. So, and let's go back and see now. You see that the dictionaries have been neatly formatted for us. Okay, so now working with JSON files are really very easy. So it is not something that is so hard. So far you know how to work with dictionaries and lists and other data structure, it is easy to work with JSON file. So now that we've been able to write into our JSON file and read from our JSON file, we can also decide to read the content of the JSON file. So, or to update the content of the JSON file. Okay, so you can see that this new dict that we have here is a list of dictionaries. So if we want to update this JSON file, how are we going to achieve that? So how we are going to achieve that is as we are going to first load the data, right? So we are going to convert this to a read statement. So we are going to change this and say we want to load the JSON data, and we are going to remove all of this. And after we load this data will return a list. So if we print read now, of course we know that the data will return a list. So now we have this list. So Python also needs to know what is inside the file before it can perform any operation. So after you load this data, you now create another variable. Okay, so we can say that new is going to be set to, well, this whatever we read here. Okay, then we now append whatever we want to append to that. So we are going to say dot append, and we pass in, let's say we want to pass in this data that we already have here. Then we now come here and open the file again. So we write with open and we pass in everything that we already have here. So we can just copy this line, so we can duplicate it, and this time around we are opening again in write mode. So we are now going to say that we want to load into the data, and we can create a variable like we do before, like we always do, and we want to say that it's going to be JSON.load, JSON.dump, and we're passing all the things that we need. So what do we want to pass in? Well, we are going to pass in new, and then we are going to pass in the file, and we can add our indent to be 3. So I believe we've been able to learn how to use JSON files, how to load, how to dump into a JSON file. So thank you so much for watching this video, and see you in the next one.